Hi everyone, the name is Nat and welcome to Exceptional Individuals Thursday webinar. We are doing deep dives into a range of ND subjects every single week. And today we are going to do a subject which really is not talked about: geography and cultural landscape of dyspraxia. We're going to be looking at how different countries look at it, see it, and maybe a better word would have been just straight up culture, because you can have multiple cultures in one country and not everyone is going to have the same understanding. We have done similar webinars on autism and dyslexia, and I thought it was about time that dyspraxia gets some love, because when I was looking at the amount of webinars we've done, dyspraxia always got a bit of the raw deal, to be honest. Less of them. I think we got to open it up. We get less people for dyspraxia. Doesn't mean it's any less important. If anything, it means we need to talk about it a little bit more. Today, we are focusing on dyspraxia. To be fair, it does all interflow. I'm Nat. I know stuff about dyspraxia. I have dyspraxia. Here's our lovely team. Today, you got myself. You have April. Oh, and I think we've got Tim lurking in the background somewhere. Feel free to ask as many questions as you. We are experts in some way or another, be it from neuroscience, lived perspective, psychology, you name it. What even is dyspraxia? It's a neurodevelopmental condition, meaning neurodevelopmental, when your brain is developing. This is when it forms, when it comes into existence, whether it's when you're in the womb or really early on. This is when it happens, and it predominantly affects coordination, which can be movement, and motor skills, picking up things. You've got gross motor skills, like picking up little things, and fine motor skills, essentially sorts of movements. It can make tasks like writing difficult, which sounds a bit like dysgraphia. There's a lot of overlap. It can make things like dressing buttons are bloody difficult. Why? Because it requires one hand and another hand and your brain all working together. Lots of moving parts. Zippers, I'm really terrible at them. Balance can be difficult because, again, there are a lot of different things your brain is processing just for you to stand up straight. And essentially, it has a knock-on impact on every single aspect of your life. It may not always be huge. When you add all these impacts together, that is when you run some challenges. What is not talked about is the social aspect of dyspraxia, which occurs with autism quite heavily. It can be quite difficult to maintain healthy relationships when you've got all these other things going on. Dyspraxia is been around for a while, probably 100 years or so, to give or take, depending on the naming conventions. It's hard to know when what we now know as dyspraxia, arguably 2013, it existed before then. And depending on what country you're from, also changes what it means and your understanding. I want you to put a little pin on the place in the world where your culture is most influenced from. Notice I said not where you're from, because, for instance, you might be British-born Asian, your culture is more impacted from your parent motherland. If you're less generation, second generation, your culture doesn't necessarily have to be predominantly from where you are based, or even necessarily where you were born from. Nice. We've got, what is that? I'm going to say Caribbean area. Actually, I might have got my geography wrong. We've got England. I'm looking like it's Scotland. One pin isn't really going to do it justice, is it? For instance, there are microcultures. I would say I've got a very southern culture in the UK, just a few miles up the road, completely different culture, or even in your house, quite different. I think these cultural impacts do make a really big difference on whether or not we're diagnosed, on whether or not we talk about it, whether or not we see it as a positive, a negative. This is where we step it up a notch in terms of difficulties. In terms of your culture, whatever that may be, where do you think your culture views dyspraxia's difference in general on a whole? You can pick three here. Do you think the culture is more like medical models? Does it see disabilities as problems, something that needs fixing? Maybe people love putting labels on you, dyspraxia, ironically. Do you think it's more of a social model where people around you know that society's a problem and that we've got to accommodate and support? Or is it more of a neurodiversity model where everyone says, you know what, we're talking about supporting anyone, it's just a fact. Brains are different. It is what it is. We can support people, but the label shouldn't define them. But you'll notice that the social model and the neurodiversity model does have a lot of overlap, where I would say the middle one is more of a proactive approach and a more of a hands up, we did wrong. And neurodiversity model is more of a blank canvas, like, it is what it is, and we support people. It's not the defining factor. The medical model is probably what we use on a day-to-day. We've got a lot of people think the social disability, and it varies. I would say more people are understanding neurodiversity models. Most people like to say cultures are social based, but let's be real. The fact that we're even talking about dyspraxia today, which is a diagnostic label, does mean that we are very firmly cemented in the medical model. It depends. For instance, someone say negative, one would see support is needed, and one might even say it's positive. It really varies. Looking at the countries all around the world, let's be honest, people aren't really given two monkeys about dyspraxia on the whole. There isn't that much research going on. The main countries that are doing research are the below. These are all your Western countries. UK has been in dyspraxia research right up to this year when the main funder of research, the Dyspraxia Foundation, collapsed, which is obviously devastating. Australia, Canada, US is starting, though they predominantly call it DCD, different understanding there, and a lot of European countries. Research is going on. It's a drop in the water compared to other conditions. Dyspraxia always seems to get a lot less public attention. This brings up the question, why is it? Why do we have a massive gap in our understanding of dyspraxia? We know that's not true. There is limited research compared to other conditions. There is less research, which means less people are bothered about it. As you can see, one feeds into the other. It grows and it grows. That being said, there is more research now than there has ever been. Why are people getting more interested in dyspraxia? But let's face it, you have all turned up today. That wouldn't have happened 10 years ago. Why are more people suddenly caring that dyspraxia is a thing and wanting to learn more about it? Embracing neurodiversity? Yeah, it's a thing. We know it. Let's learn more about it. With most things, all these answers are always way more nuanced than we normally give them credit for. More diagnosed? Yeah, if you're diagnosed with it, maybe more people want to learn about it. It all comes about awareness, doesn't it? People want to educate themselves on dyspraxia? True. Like I said, I had it as a kid, didn't know what it was, didn't really care. As I've gotten older, I actually wanted to know what was this thing that I got given. More awareness on TV and social media. Again, it's got a long way to go. I can name a handful of people who are dyspraxic now who are on TV. Like I said, Cara Delevingne, a guy who was on Doctor Who. There's lots of cartoons which I think you could probably say based on that qualities. It's seen as co-occurring. Yeah, more and more people are learning about comorbidity, which means if you have one thing, you likely have another thing. Marie says, I have been told that I will not get a diagnosis of DCD because I am an adult. It was originally only in children. Like most of the NDs, the more people have learned about them, the more they realize that it doesn't just drop away when you become an adult. There is a lack of professionals who are trained in diagnosing it. And if you were to go to the workplace and say, hey, I've got this, can you help me? They probably wouldn't have a clue. The truth is, the NHS is a bit of a lottery. It depends where you are in the country, depends on your practice, depends on your GP. It's tough. Tim says private diagnosis is more common in adult rather than NHS. That is true. I think the truth is, adults don't want to be seen as weak. And if you're struggling with something, traditionally that's seen as a weakness. Where children, if you see them struggling, as an adult, you want to support them. So we've always done more for children than we have for adults. As we're changing, though, obviously that idea is not right now. I think things are changing. Dyspraxia has been a much slower burn. Some reasons why we are learning more about dyspraxia, because let's face it, dyspraxia can be a lot. It's not nothing in comparison to dying of malnutrition. I'm not trying to rank up different things. It's not as bad as others. Let's face it, the world's pretty awful, and it definitely has been awful. People have been dying. Child mortality rate, if you look at this lovely diagram, which always makes me feel good inside every time you're like, the world's awful, basically child death is going down everywhere around the world. If we are spending less time on keeping kids alive, that means we've got more time to then support them through their early development. Essentially, we just got more time, more resources. We're on the next stage. We went on from a startup in trying to just getting people through their very early years to now the more developed phase. Mary says, I think it's much the same as autism in terms of research and diagnosis, just far behind. They are with DCD where ASD was 15, 20 years ago. It needs to catch up. You're absolutely right on that. It's getting there. I said, as it's come down, autism's research has skyrocketed. Research slow and steady. We are getting there. As you can see here, we've got nations with logical data, essentially looking at the prevalence of things like dyspraxia and neurodivergence. This one was predominantly focused on dyslexia or autism. It's similar. The reason why it's not exact data is because there isn't the data. As you can see, there are a lot of countries which are actively monitoring, where other countries, while they may know of dyspraxia, they don't actually have the data to back it up. What are some things that are probably good to know when we're looking at the likelihood of a condition being diagnosed? First of all, it's different everywhere. Are you looking at the Diagnostical Statistical Manual of Mental Health Disorders? Are you looking at the ICD? Are you looking at a completely different model? Are some people looking for more visual signs, more internal signs? Depends on so many factors. How are you deciding who has and who doesn't have? There isn't like a consistency. It really is different across cultures. For instance, in some cultures, it is considered rude to make eye contact. Where in the Western world, don't make an eye contact, but it's considered rude. With dyspraxia, maybe there's some elements which are just considered normal and expected. And in other cultures, it's considered something to be shamed upon. We've got that to consider. Symptoms, they vary across the board and time as well. If you were diagnosed 20 years ago, there's no guarantee you'd be diagnosed today. And that's the same with all things. My question is, what is culture? Because culture plays a massive influence on whether or not it's something we care about, we consider, strength, weakness. If we understand exactly what culture is, we might be able to break it down a little bit further. Culture, way of life, it's something that completely encompasses you. Social norms, what is considered normal in that culture. For instance, if you go to another culture, the reason you don't really fit in is the norms are different. Regional traditions, what has been done has always been done. Belief systems, habits, way of life, absolutely all correct. How do we define something when we have so many different factors to consider? Intersectionality is the understanding that things aren't black and white. For instance, when you look at a diagnostic criteria, you're like, do you fidget? Yes or no? Some cultures that might be considered normal. In other cultures, maybe not. There's lots of different kind of layers, which the way we currently do things doesn't take those layers into consideration. International customs, nice, social norms, expectations. Speaking of LGBT, is it Pride Month right now? Yeah, Pride Month right now. And I think it's quite interesting to have a look at how that interplays with dyspraxia. Why do you think LGBTs, individuals with dyspraxia, face unique challenges? Because they do. I'll tell you what, there's some really interesting, non-conclusive research at the moment going on around this. However, there is anecdotal evidence, which is basically observational, that there is research going to see if you are gay, are you more likely to have dyspraxia than if you are not gay or non-binary? A lot of people say, yes, there is. Now, it should be noted, there is concrete evidence to back that up. It's an interesting area that people are looking into. For instance, the amount of people who have autism who are also LGBT, it seems disproportionate almost. They often experience low self-esteem and misgendering. It could be said it's due to your posture, because males with dyspraxia might demonstrate a more feminine pose because their body isn't adjusting or holding themselves up in a way that we've come to expect from certain genders. And females might present themselves in a more masculine pose. You may have been aware that people with dyspraxia often slouch because the brain, which tells you how to sit up straight, just isn't doing it, essentially, or it puts less emphasis in it. This is quite an interesting thing, that you will come across traditionally less masculine or feminine to your assigned gender. The idea here is to show that dyspraxia affects everyone differently. For some people, it might be more around your coordination. For others, it might be more challenging with speech. It could be your fine motor skills, like picking up every time I drop a penny on the floor or a credit card and pick it up. Sensory processing might mean that you struggle with too much light, too much sound, too much flavor, too much, like all of those things. Organization, being able to prioritize things can be more difficult. Gross motor skills, remember, it's big and gross, like capturing balls. There's different types of coordination. Social interaction, just like getting along with people, because having differences makes it harder to integrate. And spatial awareness, bumping into things. Essentially, it's like being in VR all the time, just always really finding it. There's a disconnect between what your brain is seeing and wanting to what your arms are actually, how they're interacting. Oprah says, I chose social interaction because I sometimes have trouble in this area as an autistic person. Yeah, that's a very typical trait for autism. For dyspraxia, people don't often consider it part of it. it is. Here's another question. Dyspraxia affects individuals differently. We've just proven that because you all selected different ones. Why is it often scarce in the media? For instance, if we know dyspraxia is multifaceted, meaning there is more to it than just simply clumsiness, why is it that the media just always focuses on one particular unique quality? Is it the coverage? Is it interviews with experts? Or is it educational programs? The correct answer I have is this one. Acute narrow portrayals. Yeah, I would say that is true. Coverage of dyspraxia, meaning there aren't many articles or papers talking about it, is probably a combination of factors. One reason in why the media and society in general doesn't talk about dyspraxia as much is it's bloody confusing. It has multiple names. If you have dyspraxia and someone talks about developmental coordination disorder, you probably never heard of it. But say in America, where developmental coordination disorder is more of a common term, dyspraxia doesn't always interchange. If you research developmental coordination disorder, you've already limited half your potential search outcomes. Dyspraxia is a bit more of a general term, and that because you could have developmental, which happens early on, or you could have acquired it, where you hit your head and get similar characteristics. Dyspraxia is a lot broader. On the other hand, dyspraxia, a bit more neutral, where developmental coordination disorder, it already lays the foundation of negativity. Praxia is the original word, and you can break praxia down to ideation, planning, and execution. You can understand, and this just means different from the ordinary or not able to. Not able to, praxis, not able to, thinking of what you want to do, organizing how you'll do it, or actually doing it. If we were to break dyspraxia down, the actual name here isn't talking about developmental. It's simply saying difficulty with executive functioning, with being able to think of something and get it done. Dyspraxia, while more people use it, is quite broad. Where developmental coordination disorder, it says what it is on the tin. I think there's pros and cons depending on your different preferences. Whatever one you are brought up with is the one that you typically use the most. Regardless of the naming conventions, how did people talk about it? Did they look at dyspraxia as a strength, or did they look at it as like a deficit? Because dyspraxia, the name, comes originally from the medical model, it is predominantly done from a deficit perspective. When we just talk about neurodiversity, that's much more strength-based. This also has a big part to play on. If it's a negative thing, why would you even want to talk about it? It makes sense that you would have preferred the term dyspraxia because that is a term that we use in the UK more often than not. When we are looking at culture v diagnosis, we've got to take into consideration ideas, customs, and behavior of a particular people. That's a big one. Diagnoses are reframed in different times. 100 years ago, 50 years ago, 25 years ago, in the future, it might be very different. Autism has had a massive change in the last couple of years. We went from classic autism to being psychopaths, to Asperger's, to being geniuses, to now being neutral, to being an advantage. It's changing dramatically. And I'd say dyspraxia is the same. New frameworks are not always advances. Just because we are advancing in our naming conventions doesn't mean that we are necessarily advancing in general. Some people actually miss the term Asperger's. They actually say, you know what, I prefer having that diagnosis. And when we progress to ASD, I actually think that's a step backwards. With dyspraxia, less noticeable. Progression doesn't always equal an advantage. On this question, which I can see you eager beavers have already started answering, what social economic barrier in diagnosis amongst ethnic minorities? That's a bit of a mouthful. Let me break it down. Social, as in community, people around us. Economic, we're talking about the money. What kind of local money barriers impact the diagnosis of dyspraxia amongst ethnic minorities? Any kind of ethnicity which isn't a predominant ethnicity in Z area. It depends where you are. Middle class backgrounds makes diagnosis more likely. Absolutely. You got more of that sweet disposable money, you're more likely to get a diagnosis. I'm curious to know, why did a lot of you select the first one? Because I would say absolutely not true. I'm interested to know your perspective. There's absolutely is an innate resistance. Parents are much less keen to allow assessments that may lead to a diagnosis. No, Deborah, you're right. I read it wrong. That's completely on me for reading it wrong. Resistance as in misunderstood. I read it as a genetic resistance. I can't get that because of my genetic. If we're talking about a social resistance, then yeah, I get it. The more you know. Looking at the Sergeant General's report, the WHO or medical sectors, he says culture is a concept. It's something that we've created as people, not limited to patients. Clinics and services, systems naturally immersed in their own cultures, have been ill-equipped to meet the needs of patients from different backgrounds. You also have your own biases. If you're a doctor, a surgeon, a practitioner, someone who does assessments, you also have your own biases on what you think something is. A lot of the time, when people like these professionals are learning about diagnosing, they are learning about it from one perspective. If you are from another side, yeah, that's why Jamaica has a lack of diagnosis. It's true. People don't want to get a label. Here in the UK, labels are good because it means more support, more funding. In other places, it just means more stigma. While I would say it's not been as dramatic as autism, we have come a long way. In the 30s, it was known as clumsy child syndrome, offensive and also very one-dimensional. In the late 80s, the foundation was established, though I think it was called the Dyspraxia Trust, same thing. In 1994, DCD was included in the Diagnostical Statistical Manual, which was a big deal. While I keep focusing on the DSM here, because that's more international than I would say the ICD, interestingly, the ICD and the DSM, how we diagnose people, is very aligned. They work in partnership, so they're not that different nowadays. We have changed. We're progressing. We're becoming more uniform. We're getting less murky. It could be different. Like, here are some unofficial subtypes of dyspraxia. They're unofficial because if you get dyspraxia, we're not going to be breaking it down. ADHD, it's useful to know that it can impact people very differently. You might have predominantly a motor deficit or more likely oral. How it affects you can be different. Breaking it down sub-angles potentially might be how we go moving forward with these diagnostic labels. Or we might go inwards and make it even narrower, but it can go either way. Progression doesn't always mean good. I think we've also learned a lot about culture as well here, about the fact how we read things and understand things. Let's look at the ICD-11, the International Clarification of Disease. This is created by the WHO. This is the 11th revision. You'll notice the ICD is on the 11th one, where the DSM is only on 5. This one is much more updated. Personally, I think the ICD is better. It goes in a lot more detail, where the DSM looks like a coloring book for kids. It's not very detailed. Depending on what one you want, they give you different understandings of each condition. I encourage you all to get a PDF of both books and look up dyspraxia or autism, and you'll notice how they both explain them is very different. ICD, much more detailed. What did dyspraxia look like for you? Because on this one, we spoke about how we now understand it. I just want to understand, what are your kind of characteristics, symptoms, or outlook, or observations if you aren't dyspraxic? Because I'd be curious to know, depending on what year, depending on what culture, and what diagnostic criteria, would you still get a diagnosis or would you not? It's really fascinating because I often ask myself, would I still be classed as autistic if diagnosed today? Because I have quite low support needs in comparison to other individuals. But when I was diagnosed, it was very much mainstream. Nowadays, am I more likely to be captured or less likely? What does dyspraxia look like? I remember this one now. Before, dyspraxia was male. Males had dyspraxia, women did not. If you're a female now looking for a diagnosis, it's less likely because people are stuck in the past. Yeah, I know, shocker. White. If you're white, you actually could have dyspraxia. If you come from an educated background, as in parents are educated, you are more likely to have a diagnosis. If you do not, probably not dyspraxic. Middle class, also, if you come from money, you probably may have dyspraxia. You can see here, the classics. These are the things that are forever discriminating people, are very much firmly embedded in dyspraxia. Oh, when I was a child in the 80s, if you were a clumsy girl, you were dyspraxic. If you were a clumsy boy, you were just being a boy. Why is individual variability important in understanding dyspraxia? Why is difference important? Why is the nuances on how it presents in people important to consider, rather than just looking at the kind of top line? We've got all individuals with dyspraxia have the same symptoms. We know that's not true. There are no coping strategies for dyspraxia. We know that's not true. Coping strategies can change visible symptoms over time. This is why less adults are diagnosed, because it changes over time. It doesn't go away, it changes. The booklet where we look to diagnose you, if you're an adult going for an assessment, you are not going to link up with what they are looking for, because they are looking for child symptoms and presentations. On this screen, this is the one where I want you to say, describe yourself or dyspraxia. My guess is that how you would describe yourself isn't likely to be how the diagnostic criteria would describe you. Why? Because your age, because of your gender, because of your background, because of co-occurrent, comorbid. We are easy case studies. A lot of the time, because I do a lot of science, I often try to apply to be a guinea pig for tests. The reason is because I have multiple things going on, and they want someone like pure dyspraxic, pure autism. All right, Voldemort, I'm a human being who have multiple angles to me. I think anyone who is pure simply hasn't had enough diagnosis or enough research into how their brain presents. There isn't anyone. Obviously, that's why I'm doing it, because it doesn't exist. There's no such thing. That's why it's ridiculous. Uncoordinated, clumsy, chaotic. If you ever want to know why did people think all of these things, you can blame this book, Gubby. Gubby really screwed us over, to be honest. They created a book called The Clumsy Child, and this book was annoyingly influential and screwed us for eternity. If you haven't heard of it, it's useful to know about. I wouldn't necessarily read it because it's ridiculously outdated now. This is where the kind of original term came from. It wasn't just colloquially used, it was actually a term that people use, clumsy child syndrome. First of all, one-dimensional, clumsy, not talking about any of the other aspects of it. And also child, it's not talking about the adult side of it. Might have been, yes, it was. When I did the history of dyspraxia, when we talked about the history of it, we did mention Gubby, because the book, unfortunately, has really stuck around in people's consciousness, even if we don't actually know the book. But in terms of dyspraxia rising in minority groups, we talked about how we're less likely to get a diagnosis. Still, we have already spoken about why more people in general are caring about dyspraxia. Less people are dying. We've got more time and energy to put forward to it. Considering all the barriers, is there a particular reason why more people gaining awareness from it? Yeah, again, more awareness, more help. It could be more support in schools, which are trained into not discriminate and to be more open-mindedness. In short, it is coming down to more equality. Our society is becoming more equal. Don't get me wrong, it's not perfect, not by any means. We are becoming more equal. It is a good sign of progression. We talked about dyspraxia and developmental coordination disorder. Developmental coordination disorder sounds very official and also very disordery. Dyspraxia is a very standalone name. And if you know your Latin or your Greek, it makes perfect sense. I put motor in front because, again, motor dyspraxia and other dyspraxia is different. It will change how people understand it and see it. I like showing this little iceberg because what people think it means. If you say the word dyspraxia, the connotation is clumsiness. Actually, dyspraxia is more about sensory processing, emotional impact, spatial awareness, memory problems, academic struggle. There is much more to dyspraxia than this one thing that we seem to always associate it with. Unfortunately, being called slow, stupid, clumsy, lazy, uncoordinated were also terms that were thrown about all the time. People use these labels because it's how they compared us to the neuromajority. They didn't compare us on other areas that we were succeeding on. This iceberg is quite negative focused. You could easily do an iceberg on all the positive, on how what we see the positives to what they really are. There's much, much more below the surface. Let's look at culture or cultural regions, because we did talk about geography today. Depending on your language, we're not just talking about different names in English, we're talking about different names all around the world. They can have a massive impact. I did a similar screen for autism, and that was a lot easier because autism has been around for much longer in terms of our public awareness. In Native American cultures, it was often apparently seen as clumsiness or awkwardness without any further explanation. I should note that while I've done my best to research this from the sources up on top, as I do not speak these languages, I cannot confirm nor deny any of them. In India, a lot of the time, people with disabilities were called mad or crazy, agal. This was used predominantly for autism. China just broadly categorizes it under general learning or coordination difficulties. They are much broader than we are. Nigeria apparently describes it in terms of developmental delays or coordination problems. Maybe that's more accurate. problems. I'd say it's a bit problematic. I'm not super confident on translations. Brazil actually has their own equivalent of DCD, not very well known. Can any of you confirm or deny these? Different languages will have different terms, and not all languages will have a direct translation of, say, dyspraxia. They'll use the nearest alternative, which sometimes can be fairly accurate and other times can be grossly inaccurate. What exactly is driving change? Things are getting better, and we keep saying aware. What do we mean by awareness? For instance, we are child psychiatry in the 1950s onwards. We are studying children with a fine-tooth comb. Deinstitutionalization, essentially, we are no longer locking people up for being different. Disability rights, advocacy, essentially policy are the biggest change. I hope all of you are registered to vote if you're in the UK. Politics is boring and dull and ridiculously slow. It's so important because ultimately these are the things that make the biggest difference over a long period of time. A quick overview on some of the cultural factors we have spoken about and investigated today. We've spoken about how dyspraxia affects people very differently, and the media just doesn't talk about this. We focus on how people from other cultures, such as LGBT communities, they experience it very differently, often not represented as well. There isn't any evidence of higher prevalence. We have unique challenges due to how we present something. We associate it with another characteristics. How we move, we assume it is either masculine or feminine. We've spoken about how non-traditional relationships can be easier. If you conform in a different way, it might be easier for you to go with a non-traditional relationship because people are generally just more open. We've spoken about ethnic and socio-economic background, the connection between wealth income and racial heritage and background. Older generations are often underdiagnosing, which can lead to guilt, depression. If you do resonate with dyspraxia, and in the UK, you can get support, regardless of what you call it, regardless of what people understand about it. If you say, you know what, I struggle with some of the things that you mentioned today, and I would benefit from support in the workplace, do get in touch. That's basically what Exceptional Individuals does 9 times out of 10. Our next webinar, if you enjoyed today, will be next Thursday, and we are looking at OCD in pop culture. I think you can see where this is going. Is it just about washing your hands, being overly cleanly, liking things in order? How is it shown around the world? What is good? What is different? And might also touch upon how OCD is and isn't neurodivergent. Here is our contact details. If you want the slides today, drop us a message. If you have any questions or follow-up, drop us an email. We'll always happily get back to you. Thank you everyone so much for attending. I hope you learned a thing or two. Hopefully see you at the next one.